Hey there, this is Terrence from Photography in 123. In this video I'm going to give you a quick explanation of what bokeh is, how it works, and how you can start shooting with great bokeh in your photos right away. So if you are searching for this and you found this video, you probably know what bokeh is, but just to explain that to you, it's when you have a picture where the background and or foreground is very, very blurred, but your subject is in crisp focus. So you've probably seen portraits where you see the subject looks really good. Background is like blurry trees or forest or wherever they were, and it looks really cool. Or you've seen probably the Christmas ones where you have something in focus, a Christmas item, object, and you have the blurry lights of the tree behind. Looks really cool. So that's what bokeh is. It's essentially the blurring of the background and or foreground versus, if you're doing landscape photography, you tend to have everything clear in foreground, background, and subject. So how do you get good bokeh? There are three aspects that you need to follow. And the first one is around the lens. So I've got my my DSLR here. I'm going to show you. This is the standard 24-105 you get on a Canon 5D Mark II, and I think probably the Mark III and 4 that are out, I think have the same base one. Now I've got it on aperture priority setting, and as you can tell, maybe I'll take the lens off, cap off just to make sure. The widest aperture I can go for is 4 on this, and the narrowest is 22. So if you're familiar with your aperture settings, wide is more open, so more light's coming in, and narrow is smaller, less light coming in. The implication is the wider you go, what actually happens is the more out of focus everything besides your subject gets. So when you're trying to do a bokeh photo, you want to focus on minimizing your aperture, minimizing AE, getting it as wide as possible. So 4.0 is the smaller number, which is the widest aperture, and it's counterintuitive, I know, the numbering system, if you're not familiar with this. So if you have a lens like this, you want to go for 4. Ideally, though, you want to get a good lens for bokeh, a portrait lens. You can get something like this. This is a prime lens, meaning there is no zoom to it, just one focal length. This is a 50mm lens. You can see up there, 50mm. And the aperture I can get in there is 1.8 as the widest, which is very, very wide. Something like this in the Canon series actually is pretty inexpensive. That's one thing I do like about this particular prime lens in the Canon series. It is, I think Canadian, I paid like 120 bucks, but you get a good prime lens with a very wide aperture. Having 1.8 is probably what you want to be if you want to have some really, really extreme bokeh. If you want to get the 1.4 or one of the lenses that has much wider aperture, you'll pay a lot more money for that. But again, you'll get some extreme bokeh. This is probably sufficient for most people in terms of shooting something with really cool bokeh background. So I would suggest getting something like that. And if we just pop this on here, let me turn the camera off, and I will show you. What the change to the bokeh will be. Trying to rush this too much. Okay. So as you see, if I adjust it now, I can go all the way down to 1.8 on there. So that small little lens has a very, very wide aperture, which is great for getting the bokeh. The next important aspect for getting good bokeh, once you have a wide aperture, is going to be your distance to the subject. Right now here, for example, I have this Power Ranger dog. My kids know the name, I'm not sure, so unfortunately I forget. But, if I take a picture of him from here, I pull him further back, I'll get some good bokeh at this distance. But the closer I get, as long as I'm not getting too close for the camera's focusing distance, the more bokeh I get. So you want to narrow that gap to distance to your camera. So if you really want to get extreme bokeh, you want to get in there as close as you can while you're still getting clarity on your subject, and that will just exponentially impact your bokeh, your background blur, which will be great. So that will be key. The third aspect to bokeh, to have a really good one, is distance between your subject and, assuming you're doing bokeh in the background, or if it's the foreground. Obviously, if your subject is right up against the background, so let's pretend this lens is his background, like it's a wall, your subject's standing in front of, or a tree, it's going to be almost as in focus as your subject. I mean, depending on the aperture, of course, and how close you are to the subject. Maybe not, but for the most part, the closer it is to the background, the less bokeh you have. So the more your subject, and we'll have this little Paw Patrol guy move away from the lens, the bokeh will be magnified a lot more. So if you're trying to get that effect, if you're trying to do like a Christmas one, that's probably a good project with coming up with the season coming, of a ornament you have on a table and you want the Christmas lights blurred in the background. Have that ornament as far from the Christmas tree as you can, and on some setting, and then get as close to that ornament as you can. So having your ornament and your dog, or your camera over here, and then a lot of distance to your background, this is going to be very, very blurred, which is going to make for a fantastic photo. So there you have it. Those are the techniques for getting really good bokeh in your photo. I suggest you go out and try using them right now. The sooner you try to get into using these techniques, these tricks, the better it will be for you, and the sooner you'll be able to really understand what you're supposed to do.